Welcome to week 3 here at MPAI 760 at Georgetown Applied Intelligence Program. Good comments for week 2, good overviews. I think the Venezuela piece was kind of thrown in there. I threw it in there just to get people thinking about a current events issue, and I think everyone did pretty well on that, especially because, again, it was more of a creative thinking type. So I've released all the papers and everything. There's a couple of questions about the midterm and the final. I released everything, or the whole class, so you should be able to see all that now as we go forward and be able to balance out your assignments with whatever other classes and obligations you have. So announcements, reviewing just week 2, state sponsorship of terrorism. One of the themes of the Mpai is that it's a tool of asymmetric warfare. It's what the weak states do when they have to counter a strong state. And we see that, again, through all our major state sponsors of terrorism. Hezbollah, or Iran uses Hezbollah to counter the superior conventional strength of Israel. Pakistan uses various Lashkar-e-Taiba and other Kashmir militant groups to counter the Indian superiority in conventional forces. So that's kind of a theme you should take away from the state sponsor chapters. And one of the big things, I've done some research on this, terrorist groups, most of them fail. Most of them are not successful. Most of them are put in the dustbin of history. I suspect ISIS will be. I suspect Sikh, you might have heard of Sikh separatism, or you probably haven't heard of Sikh separatism because they're, again, relegated to the dustbin of history. All sorts of groups are, but a key variable that state sponsors have is funding. And that's why Hamas, which gets funding from Iran, Hezbollah, which gets a lot of funding from Iran, that's why they have succeeded while so many other groups have failed. Other groups, Red Brigades, GIA in Algeria, they needed money. And one of the themes you'll hear in a future course or future lecture is that terrorist groups are fundraisers that occasionally kill people. And that's true. If you don't have a base of assets, you don't have money, you have to turn to criminal enterprises which crowd out whatever political objective a terrorist group is trying to accomplish. So that is a key point for state sponsors. That's why Hezbollah has survived for 35 years and is now a political entity. That's why Hamas has survived for 30 years. IRA survived for so long because they, if not got state sponsorship, but certainly were able to draw on funds from a massive diaspora, particularly in the United States, that funded the IRA. So again, state sponsorships, particularly ones that receive a steady stream of funding, tend to survive for years and years at a time. And then one question to leave you with, and this is a question that we don't always have an answer for, is do state groups always do the bidding of their state sponsors? Hezbollah operates, people conflate Hezbollah with Iran, but in fact Hezbollah definitely operates on its own goals and its own desires, despite getting massive support from Iran. The Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Pakistani groups, tend to, the best analogy is the genie is out of the bottle. Pakistan has an extraordinarily hard time trying to constrain these groups, and that is a key issue going away from, as we leave this topic. Do groups always do the bidding of their state? So good questions overall. Preview of week 3, WMD terrorism, an area that I have a lot of expertise in based on my previous work and previous study. So again, feel free to answer or ask any questions on this. So what I want to do is just cover some myths of WMD terrorism. And I bring this up because I'm old enough to remember the Iraq War, the run-up to the Iraq War, and some of you might have heard this in my previous classes. I think the Iraq War was a mistake, and I think we went into the Iraq War because of the fear of WMD and terrorism. And I think we overreacted to it because not enough politicians, intelligence analysts, journalists, or even the public as a whole understood the dynamics of WMD terrorism, the chances, the constraints, and the issues related to it. So I want to start off with a couple of myths that tend to permeate our understanding of WMD terrorism. The first is it's easy and inevitable. That is not true. WMD terrorism is hard. It is hard to acquire the materials necessary to conduct an attack. It is hard to ship the materials, if you're Al-Qaeda, overseas to actually conduct the attack. And it's hard to disseminate the material in a manner that causes mass casualties. Even if you had highly enriched uranium sitting in your basement, the process to actually make it a usable weapon is very technically intensive. So it is not as easy as you might have the naysayers say out there. Al-Qaeda was on the verge of an attack. And I've heard there's been different stories out there that Al-Qaeda was about to conduct an attack. And you might hear Al-Qaeda had ricin, Al-Qaeda had dioxin gas. Al-Qaeda, one of the fanciful myths is Al-Qaeda was about to hit the DC metro system and cause essentially a metro station to become like a Nazi concentration camp, a gas chamber in a Nazi concentration camp. Those are all myths. Those are all really things that you hear in the headlines, but when you peel back the onion, there was actually not a lot there. So Al-Qaeda was not on the verge of an attack. And Al-Qaeda often gets compared to Aum Shinrikyo, which was the Japanese cult in 1995 that conducted a sarin attack in the Tokyo subway station. This was a surprising attack that it killed 15 people, and I'll send a video out that highlights this. But it killed 15, supposed to kill many more, and a lot of people thought that Aum Shinrikyo, well, if Aum Shinrikyo was able to do it, Al-Qaeda would be able to do it next. Fortunately, depending on your perspective, Al-Qaeda, one, didn't have the financial resources that Aum Shinrikyo had. It didn't have the permissive environment. The Japanese police at the time would not investigate Aum Shinrikyo. And then third and most importantly, I believe, they could manufacture the sarin 15 miles away from their target. It was manufactured at a place called Satan 7, which was just up the road from Tokyo. They didn't have to cross an ocean like Al-Qaeda does or ISIS has to do to conduct their attack. So there are reasons why Aum Shinrikyo were able to do it and Al-Qaeda was not. And just as a interesting point, the head of Aum Shinrikyo, Ashok Asahara, was just executed this past week in Japan. He was just hung for the crimes conducted in 1995. So WMD can be sent via shipping containers. We've spent billions of dollars trying to arm shipping containers to do this. I always found this logic a little bit dubious. I think there is a lot of effort. If a terrorist organization was to get WMD, they would go through a lot of effort, and they wouldn't just willy-nilly send something via shipping container to the United States. I always found, again, that logic a little bit presumptuous, and I also know a lot of people who think that WMD can be used for a shipping container are also on the boards of various companies that make money from shipping container detection systems. So just be advised on that. Terrorists only need to acquire a weapon. That's not really true. Terrorists need to, if they acquire their weapon, they still have to ship it. They still have to disseminate it. There is a massive, arduous process for them to conduct a mass-scale attack. And again, if in order for them to conduct an attack, they have to do 10 things right without being detected by whatever country's intelligence system is there. So they need a lot more than to just acquire the weapon. And then my favorite, maybe not my favorite, but terrorists will transfer weapon to a non-state actor. This is what sold the Iraq WMD war, or the Iraq war, that Saddam Hussein would give WMD to terrorist group X, and they would conduct a mass-scale attack. One, it's not as easy as you think it is. It's not like you ship this through Amazon or FedEx to a terrorist group. And two, autocratic or totalitarian states tend not to give away their key weapons just willy-nilly to random terrorist groups. They've invested a lot of money and time into these. They're not going to just give the keys away to Group A, knowing full well that if a terrorist does use it, they would be on the receiving end of whatever retaliation there is. So those are some of the myths, WMD, as you go forward. I look forward to your answers in this week, and if there's questions or issues, don't hesitate to contact me.